Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. As we said at the start of our program, that we are going to shed light on the achievements and the mega projects that Egypt have witnessed in the year 2025, and especially in the field of manufacturing of vehicles. And to shed more light on this, we have the pleasure to have with us over the phone our dear guest, engineer Mohamed Sheta, a vehicles manufacturing expert. Good morning, sir.
Yes, a very beautiful good morning to you and also to the viewers of Nile TV.
Thank you so much. Could you please shed more light on the most important achievements in the vehicles manufacturing field in Egypt in the year 2025?
Yes, actually we witnessed quite some improvement and some achievements in the year 2025. We've seen the meetings of President al-Sisi as well as Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli with several delegations and representatives from the automotive companies, as well as, and this is even more important, from the feeding companies for automotive components. And in addition to that, we also witnessed the opening of several automotive component companies recently, as well as the foundation laying of several other automotive company brands which entered the Egypt for the first time. The Prime Minister, Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, is very keen on attracting as many new companies as possible. This is why we've seen a lot of efforts done and put during 2025. Just recently, for example, the official page of the Prime Minister's office on Facebook published an article about the opening of the Leone factory, which is, according to the news report, the 10th or 11th factory in Egypt, actually, for providing the wiring harness for the cars, which are completely for export. So, and this is a very important sign. Because exporting the components and exporting the cars as well is the major benefit which Egypt will benefit from. In addition to that, also the official page of the Prime Minister's office published the signing ceremonies and the meetings of the Prime Minister with the representative of BYD, Mrs. Stella Lee, which is the Vice President of the biggest Chinese company for Chinese cars and for Chinese electric vehicles as well. And it's also the biggest company worldwide for electric vehicles, as they are planning to enter the Egyptian market officially. And they're even planning to have a plant and a assembly factory together with their Egyptian partner Mansour, which was also in the meeting with the Prime Minister. So these are just maybe 2 or 3 examples of more than 20 meetings and different openings and signing ceremonies which the Prime Minister office has announced during 2025.
Yes, Engineer Sheta, also the Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli in his press conference after a weekly cabinet meeting a month ago have mentioned that Egypt is very keen in order to introduce and produce actually monthly and yearly more than thousands and thousands of manufactured cars here in Egypt. Give us an idea about this and about what the Prime Minister spoke about increasing the factories for producing a large number of cars.
Yes, as I mentioned just before, there had been over 20 meetings of the Prime Minister with the different car representatives and the different car companies. And this was, on all these meetings, were mainly for signing memorandum of understandings and some contracts for the assembly of vehicles in Egypt. The Prime Minister, Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, mentioned before that in 2024, we imported cars from abroad for approximately $4 billion US dollars. And he explained that this number is too high and that Egypt wants to supply the demand inside the Egyptian market more from the locally assembled cars. So this is why there had been signings with several European as well as Chinese as well as Korean and Japanese companies to produce the models instead of importing them, to produce them locally. So we saw approximately, like I said, approximately 20 signings of different contracts and memorandum of understanding, which will, some of them already started assembling indeed, and some of them are already exporting cars, like for example, the Nissan company exported last year, I think, around 10,000 cars, something like that. So this is a huge number compared to the numbers in the years before. And we are expecting in 2026 that most of these assembly lines will be completed, and that the start of the assembly of locally assembled cars will start in 2026. What I think is most important in all of this is the export point. I think it's extremely important that we produce cars in Egypt according to the international specification, especially the European specification, because this will allow the Egyptian companies and allow Egypt to export directly to Europe. And exporting directly to Europe means that you will export them customs free, because of the free trade agreement which Egypt has with the EU. It will make it possible for Egyptian car companies to export cars to, and components as well, to Europe customs free. And this is a huge advantage compared, for example, to the cars assembled in China, for example, which have to pay between 18 to 38% customs when exporting directly from China to the EU. So this is a unique opportunity for Egypt to attract Chinese car companies and also Chinese component companies to come to Egypt, assemble and manufacture their cars and their components in Egypt, and then export them to Europe customs free instead of paying 38%. And this is why, for example, during these taxes had been imposed in November 2024, and this is why many car companies from China started buying assembly lines and factories in Europe, and also building new factories in Europe in order to avoid paying those 38% taxes. So, like I said, this is a golden opportunity for Egypt. I hope that the government and the private sector would grab this opportunity and try to attract as many Chinese car companies and component companies to come to Egypt and assemble and manufacture their products in Egypt and export them to the EU customs free.
Yes, Engineer Sheta, this means that you mean that the manufacturing of cars or vehicles in Egypt is going to exceed and to increase, and is going to meet the market needs here in Egypt, and that Egypt will going to be able to export, isn't it?
Yes, the potential is there. I mean, like I said, it is very important in order to export that we use a European specification. And European specifications means, among others, for example, the European Euro NCAP, the European New Car Assessment Program for crash tests. So this is something very important. Until now, we don't have any crash test facility in Egypt. So this means if you want to export cars to Europe, we need to do the crash tests in Europe itself. So this is a very important thing which Egypt needs to adapt to during the next few weeks or for a few months. The second thing, also we need for the assembly line itself, we need to use the international standards as well.
Yes.
We need to use the international standards as well, in terms of the bodyworks, as well as the other related matters to the safety specs, for example, because in Europe there are many safety options which are standard. For example, like the ESP, the Electronic Stability Program, or the TPMS, the Tire Pressure Monitoring System. So all these active and passive safety features, they need to be standard as well in order to be able to export to Europe. I think we should, currently at this point, the few buses and the few passenger cars which are exported are focusing more on the African countries and some other Arab countries. I think we should focus more on the European market, as this is one of the biggest markets in the world. And secondly, because the profit margins in the European market would be much higher, also for the car companies, and consequently, the return of foreign currency would be much higher for the government as well as for the companies manufacturing these cars.
Yes. Engineer Sheta, the idea of exporting or manufacturing here spare parts of the cars, and the idea of the act of assembly or assembling the parts of the vehicles here in Egypt, give us an idea about this.
Well, I mentioned this many times before in several interviews as well as on social media. It is crucial to attract the component manufacturers, the international component manufacturers, before we approach the automotive companies, because without having the international component manufacturers in Egypt, which could supply the quality and the quantity of the components to the automotive companies required for assembling cars with international and European standards in Egypt.
Hello? Engineer Mohamed Sheta, hello?
To come and invest in Egypt. And by the way, the investments of the component companies and the spare part companies is sometimes even much bigger. They reach up to $4 or $5 billion US, whereas an assembly factory is only an investment of $1 to $2 billion.
Yes.
So the investments which I would attract, the foreign direct investments which Egypt would attract from the component and the spare parts companies, would be much bigger actually than the automotive companies itself. This is the first thing. So how do I attract the component and the spare parts companies, and why didn't they come until today, with just a few exceptions like Leone, for example? The problem why we weren't able to attract so many component and spare parts companies so far is because the Egyptian fleet of passenger cars in Egypt is still relatively small compared to the inhabitants of Egypt. We have around 100 million citizens in Egypt, and we have only around 7 to 8 million registered passenger cars. So this is a very small number, and we need to have at least 20 to 30 million cars in Egypt registered in order to attract those component and spare parts factory to come and invest. So, in order to reach 20 or 30 million cars in Egypt in a relatively small time period, we need to open the import of used cars and also expand the Egyptian initiative, the so-called Mubadra for Egyptian expats, and make it easier for the Egyptian expat to import cars to Egypt and use them, and even pay the customs in dollars like it is done with the Mubadra now. And I think this would enhance and help us a lot in attracting the component and spare parts factories to come to Egypt very soon.
Yes, Engineer Sheta, Egypt is very keen, and also the Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli have also mentioned this in several occasions concerning the localization of localizing the vehicles and the industry of the vehicles and the related industries. Why is it important for this to Egypt and its economy?
Yes, the localization of the component industry is extremely important, because without local companies being able to provide the components and the spare parts, you will not be able to build up an economy, an industry, an automotive industry. Over the past 30 or 40 years, we have in Egypt, according to some sources from the Feeding Association, the Egyptian Automotive Feeding Association, we heard numbers about having like 800 Egyptian factories providing and producing components. But unfortunately, only a small number, maybe like 5 to 10 companies out of these 800 companies were able to export components over the past 30 years. So, and this number might even be less now. So this means we need to make this industry much more professional by getting the foreign companies and the international component companies to come to Egypt and start cooperations with these Egyptian companies. These Egyptian companies in the past 30 years were just focusing on the local market and the locally assembled markets for the Egyptian market, not for export. So, and as I mentioned before, the Egyptian market is extremely small, the fleet market in Egypt. So this is why the small, the average capacity of the automotive companies in Egypt during the past 30 years was between 2,000 to 5,000 cars per factory, which is a very small number. In order to have an export company, an export factory, you need to have a capacity nowadays of minimum 200,000 to 400,000. This is why it is extremely important to attract the international automotive companies, which would invest 1 to 2 billion US dollars in these export factories with a minimum capacity of 200 to 400,000 units. Yes. So if we just have 5 international companies, 5 companies times 200,000, this means an output of 1 million cars for export yearly. This means you need to have at least 500 component factories to be able to provide the quantity and the quality for those 1 million cars for export. So this is why I think we need to focus now, the Egyptian government needs to focus now on attracting the components and spare parts companies. And the second step, and the step before that actually, is to open the import of used cars and to improve and reopen the Mubadra initiative for Egyptian expats again. And then the third step would be contacting again the other international car manufacturers to come and invest directly as a foreign direct investment from the mother company to inside Egypt. Yes. And especially focus on the Chinese companies, because the Chinese companies, like I mentioned earlier, the Chinese companies currently pay up to 38% customs in Egypt, And if they come to Egypt and establish their factories inside Egypt, they can export to the EU, the European Union, customs-free.
Yes. Engineer Sheta, could you please shed more light on the most important Egyptian foreign partnerships and the role in the future of localizing and manufacturing the vehicles in Egypt?
Yes, currently I think the most important partnership in Egypt is the partnership between Leone and the opening of up to more than 10 factories of Leone currently in Egypt. Leone is one of the biggest companies for wiring harnesses for the cars. They're exporting to many, directly to many international companies like BMW and Land Rover and Range Rover and other companies. So I think this is one of the most important companies we currently have in Egypt. Aside of that, the Prime Minister also and Minister Kamel al-Wazir also witnessed different signings and meetings with other companies. For example, the CEO of Volkswagen South Africa, Martina Bina, she just had a meeting with Prime Minister, with the Minister Kamel al-Wazir a few weeks ago for assembling, for the discussion of assembling Volkswagen cars in Egypt, and this was attended by Karim Sami Saad as well, the importer of Volkswagen itself. Karim al-Nagar was not present at this meeting, but the Minister Kamel al-Wazir also had a conference call during this meeting with the CEO of Volkswagen brand in Germany, Mr. Schaefer, directly during this meeting. So, so this is also a very important indicator that the European car companies are very interested in cooperating with the Egyptian government and investing in Egypt. And aside from that, like I said, there have been over 20 different meetings over the past couple of months during 2025. We need to wait till the beginning of the year because many of these companies and these memorandum of understanding will start to take shape in 2026.
Yes.
But I'm very confident that we will be having some good news during the next couple of months as well.
Yes, great. I thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your valuable information. Engineer Mohamed Sheta, vehicles manufacturing expert. Really had the pleasure to have this phone with you. Ladies and gentlemen, a short break and I want to be back with you.